We're actually launching into a new series over these summer months. I wanted to also let you know that our senior pastor, Johnny Pereira, is out for the month of July. That's something that our elders do as together to give him and his family rest and time to prepare for the coming ministry year. And so over the course of this month and in August, you will hear from other members of our teaching team as well. We're going to be in a series that we simply titled Summer at Salem Chapel. So it's going to be a little bit of everything, right, this summer. And to be quite honest, these are passages that the Lord has really worked in our lives as your pastors and staff personally over the course of this year. And so that's why we're sharing them together with you, because that's what God wants us to do, to pass that along. So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 11 today. If you've got a copy of God's Word with you, I'm going to invite you to turn there. I want to highlight also, this is a special weekend, being a holiday weekend. I'm very thankful for the freedom that we are afforded as citizens in this country, and we celebrate. Hopefully you get time to celebrate that with friends and family over the course of the weekend. I know many are also traveling on vacation, and I thought that was really appropriate this morning. And thinking through, these times we look forward to these weekends where there's holidays, where we have a little extra time, maybe the pace moves differently for you. Maybe you're caught up on a little extra sleep this morning even than you normally get. Or maybe you're out of town now, or you're heading out of town maybe after this service today. And the idea being rest, I think universally we could all say that rest is something that we generally like and look forward to, right? And in fact, maybe some of us would even say that the period of time between times of rest in our life continues, it seems like, to get wider and wider and wider. And I was remembering several years ago now, my children are much older, but I remember the first time that I tried to take both of my children to the beach for a week. And just the sheer necessity of stuff that was involved. We've got a picture, I believe, that illustrates something similar to my experience that we can put up there. But the sheer amount of stuff that's needed to pack into a vehicle to get to the beach, right? You guys had experience like this? All right, so you got all the clothes. That's pretty essential. Now, this is by no means a derogatory statement, but I have a house full of ladies, and they have many things that they need to have for very specific situations at the beach, right? If we're going to go out, we have to have a certain outfit with a certain pair of shoes. If we walk to the beach, we have a certain outfit, we have a cover-up, certain pair of shoes. Just recently, we were on vacation, and there was a whole half of a bag dedicated just to shoes, right? That's a reality in our house. Plus, you have to have all the flotation things. You've got to have the sand toys, right? If you have a baby, those of you that have a newborn right now, you really feel this. You got to have the pack and play. You got to have all of the diapers and all the baby supplies. You've got to have that floating thing that they sit in if they actually go out into the water. You got to have all the sunscreen, and you pack it full. I literally remember one time I had packed all of the cargo area, right? And I still had stuff. Okay, and so we dug out of the garage and found this old soft car top carrier, strapped that on top of the SUV, and then the girls also wanted to bring their bikes, and so we had a bike rack out the back. I mean, it very similar looked like that, or maybe like Jed Clampett from the Beverly Hillbillies. You guys probably don't know what I'm talking about, but that was a reality, right? You had to take all of the stuff, and it probably took me, an hour and a half to get everything in there. It's like playing Tetris, right? This box is this big, I can fit it there. I think there's a little bitty hole at the top that I can see out the back if I need to when I'm driving. And when we got to the location, you know what happened again? All the unloading happened again. I had to take it out. And I remember after that trip, and I should also add, there was not a lot of sleep that happened. Anytime we go on vacation with a baby, there's not a lot of sleep that happens. And so when we got back from this idyllic vacation to the beach, it's family vacation, I was exhausted, right? I was exhausted transporting all of the stuff, trying to deal with routines in a new environment. We got back and I was and you may have felt the same way on family trips. Now I'm ready for my real vacation, right? I'm ready to go away and get some actual rest, right? We want rest. It's something that we desire. You think about our life and the reality of the things that we face day to day. Life often just keeps moving, and we often find ourselves in this place where we can't seem to catch a breath, right? Whether that's physically tired. Some of us may be physically tired this morning. Shout out to those parents of young kids. You may be physically tired, right? This morning, the routine got mixed up a little bit. Thank you for being here. You may be exhausted. You may be coming off a big season in your life of a project you're working on, and you barely just scraped across the finish line, right? Or maybe you're not there yet, and you're really trying to stay motivated to finish. Maybe you're emotionally drained this morning. This has been a hard year for you in relationships, people that you care about. Maybe some things have been said or done to you this year that have just been really taxing on you. You can't process it all, and it just feels emotionally draining. I know many times that takes more out of me than the physical aspect, right? Maybe there's a spiritual tiredness in your soul today. Maybe this has been an intense year where you felt really attacked spiritually. You just can't seem to understand how to proceed, right? We all find ourselves in these places. Maybe a deep-seated weariness in your spirit this morning. Maybe you're carrying a heavy, heavy burden. So we all want rest in some way. God knew that. He actually made us to need rest. If you remember, when God created the world, after the creating was done, God did something unusual, right? Like after he had spoke everything into being, he did something unusual, something that he didn't have to do. He rested. He rested, it says. Now, why did he do that? He wasn't out of strength. It's not like he used up all of his power and he needed to recharge, like your cell phone. Like he wasn't out of strength. He wasn't tired. God wasn't taking a nap, because it took a lot out of him. God was modeling something important to you and to me. We have limitations. We have limitations. And as much as we would consider those to be a curse sometimes, especially when you get a little older and it feels like your body's starting to betray what you want to do. And you're like, I don't like this limitation. I don't want to admit that I can only do so much. I don't want to even give thought to the fact that maybe the best years of my life, my prime, has already passed me by. It's a weird place to be. But yet, before sin came into the world, before anything like that, before our bodies even began to break down and age the way that they do, God modeled rest. That is needed. That's an important, beautiful thing. But something also that only he truly can provide. So we're going to look at Jesus' invitation to rest this morning. I've titled this sermon, Rest for Your Soul. That's what Jesus' invitation is for us today. So I'm going to start reading in chapter 11, verse number 25. And initially, we're going to read through verse number 30. Then we'll read into chapter 12 later. Okay, so let's read verse 25 now. At this time, Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and intelligent and revealed them to infants, right? What he's meaning by that is the reality of who he is, right? The Son of God, what his plan for salvation was. So was it made known to the wise and to the intelligent, was given to everyday, average, common people like you and me. Yes, Father, verse 26, because this was your good pleasure. All things have been entrusted to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son desires to reveal to him. And then he leads into a passage that may be very familiar to you. Verse 28, come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take up my yoke and learn from me, because I am lowly and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. This morning, as we kind of dive into this passage together, one thing I want you to hold on to, if you remember nothing else, is this, that Jesus offers generous rest for weary and burdened souls. Jesus offers generous rest. We'll unpack why the generous for weary and burdened souls, right? So this is an invitation, right? Anytime Jesus is saying come, he does that often, right? That's an invitation. It's not forced. It's an offer, right? He's offering, he's inviting us to come and receive rest. And he describes really two conditions. What I'm going to propose are two conditions that can exist simultaneously and may exist simultaneously in you this morning. Two conditions of the soul. The first condition, what we'll call for our time together today, the weary soul. The weary soul. He says, all of you who are weary. And if you pack into, what is the meaning of that word weary mean? It really gets down to the idea of you are exhausted from striving. That's a biblical word, striving there, that's used often in our English translation. It doesn't mean just you're weary from trying hard. You're weary from doing work. Okay, work is not a bad thing. Laboring is a good thing. Scripture affirms that over and over again. Work, again, like rest, was another thing that God instituted before sin came into the world. So working is not a bad thing. Working hard at your job is not a bad thing. Working hard to provide for your family is not a bad thing. So he's not just talking about those who are tired from a good day's work. He's getting down to this idea of striving, right? Striving. The weary soul is someone that's just striving to make it, just trying to get by, right? Striving, I'll give you a definition for that. I don't think I have that on the screen, but striving would be defined as laboring at all costs in the power of my own strength to achieve my own goals. Laboring or working at all costs, right? Nothing is too valuable for me to lay down in my strength for my goals. That's what it means to strive. And we, each and every one of us, are guilty of striving on occasion. This is reality, right? We are striving to keep up with a facade, right? Keep up with the Joneses in my life. I can strive for that. I want to be an awesome boss, employee, a loving spouse, an involved parent, active at church, active in the community, be well informed to current events and what's happening in my world. Why? So that other people see that and notice my efforts. Right? That's something that we strive to do. You really strive to live that Instagram perfect life, right? Where every day has a picture and a caption. And everyone sees that and they're like, man, I wish I could live like they live. It takes a lot of work to juggle all of that appearance, doesn't it? It takes a lot of work to paint that rosy picture that everything is great. Striving, that's striving. What about someone that's striving and they're weary from avoiding disappointing other people? We'll call that Superman syndrome. Like, I can't stop. I've got to keep everything going because so many people depend on me. Is that your spirit this morning? Like, you don't understand. Like, I would love to rest, but I've got this important role. I've got this important job, and I have got to be on it every single time. I can't miss a beat. There's too many people depending on me. You can get in that place of striving, right? Because why? Because there's a measure of pride in that, right? I'm important. I'm essential. People need me. I get into this place of weariness from trying to maintain that image, to not let them down. What about someone who is weary from giving without receiving back in a relationship? Striving to be loving, striving to give affection, striving to demonstrate faithfulness and loyalty, and the other person in relationship with is not giving them anything in return. That's hard, isn't it? Have you been there? That's difficult. Day in and day out, to give and to give and to give and to not receive. Now, something about that is like, in Christ, that can be a beautiful thing, right? Because Christ gives me the ability to love first without requirement. But if I'm doing this in my own strength, if I'm just trying to make this thing work, and I'm sacrificing myself out there every day, can come to a place where I'm just tapped out. Tapped out. I'm weary. What about being weary from frequent failure? Nothing that I've tried has worked out. I've tried desperately to make my circumstances change. I want to see something different. Every time I try something, I fall flat on my face, right? Have you been there before? You'd be tired of trying. Tired of trying. I have no more ideas. I have no more creative juices. They're done. I can't improve it. I should just give up. See, that weary soul, that striving soul can do a couple things to you if you're not careful and you stay in that place. What can striving do? First, it can blind you. Right? It can blind you to the dangers of self-sufficiency, which we are so inclined to want to believe. Right? Again, going back to that limitations thing, I don't have limitations. I don't care what you say, God. I can fake it till I make it. Right? I'm going to push through. You're going to see. I'm going to like shove all the haters, how wrong they were. I'm going to make it happen. I'm blind. I'm blind to what it's taken from me. It blinds me. It can also deceive me. I live in this pattern of believing that there's just a solution just over the next hill, right? We were talking about Disney movies in the green room before service. Like, that's the Disney philosophy, but a dream is your wish your heart makes. Just get out there and make a wish. And it's going to happen, right, if you just put a little more effort into it. But sometimes it doesn't happen, right? We're disenfranchised. We're disenchanted. It deceives us. And then it can also rob us. What does it rob from us? It steals our contentment. Living in that place of striving steals my contentment. Nothing is ever enough. I made this one goal that I was looking forward to for all this time. I worked so hard. I finally got it. And then what's there on the other side? Another goal. Another finish line. Another person in my life who's found out or figured it out more than I have. And so now I've got to move it over here. Just one more step. Just one more step. And what's it doing? Slowly taking away my sense of contentment. I'm no longer happy for where God has me, for the blessings that He's given to me, for the influence that He's allowed me to have. I want more. So what should be a time of celebration actually comes with even more crushing weariness, because the job is not done. That's what striving is. To sum up what the weary soul lives by, this is the mantra that we live by when we are in this place. You know you need to stop, but you don't know how. You know you need to stop. You can sense it in your soul. This is not leading me to that place of rest that I need. This is not good for my spirit. But I honestly don't know how to unwind it. This is how I think. This is how I live. You need a rest this morning that can redirect you. A rest that can redirect you. The answer isn't to give up. You just need a new direction. Right? Jesus can meet you in that place this morning. But let's move on to the next condition of the soul. Call this one the burdened soul. The burdened soul. You have to find that as those who are being crushed under some kind of particular heaviness. There's certain realities, because of how sin operates, that we are all carrying a burden. We carry a burden every single day, and the fact that sin has affected my life. There are scars from that, decisions that I've made. There are things that other people have done to me, or they have sinned against me, that even if I forgive them, perhaps there are lingering scars that come from that. There are burdens that we carry because we live in a world that is affected by sin. Things don't happen the way that we think that they should. Things don't happen the way that God would want them to, right? There's evil present in our world. There's injustice present in our world. There's pain and grief and sorrow. These are things that even for someone who knows Jesus Christ, those are realities because of the world that we live in. that we experience. Maybe this is for you, this is you this morning. There's no way I could possibly cover all of the burdens that each of us maybe have carried into this room, but maybe it's something like the loss of a family member or a friend this year that's just been very weighty for you, and rightly so. Even if I know that someone is with Jesus when they die, it still hurts me to not be with them, right? I've done several funerals. Not my favorite part of being a pastor, to be honest, but I think probably one of the more important ones. And something that I say when we've done funerals, and this is true, is for all of our life, we just accept death as being the most, like a natural part of life. Maybe even say that phrase. You've caught yourself saying like, death, it's a natural part of life. I disagree. I fundamentally disagree. I think the Bible disagrees. I think death is the most unnatural reality. That's not how things should be. That's not how things were intended to be, right? So it is hard. It's confusing. It's disorienting when we lose somebody to death. Maybe there's pain of abuse or injustice against you or against someone you care about that you're carrying this morning. That's a burden. Someone harmed you physically, sexually, emotionally. Someone got special treatment that you didn't receive at work. Somebody treated you without dignity and without love as someone made in the image of God because your skin color is different than theirs. That's a burden. Might be financial hardship or insecurity. It may be uncertainty at work. It may be uncertainty in relationships that you have. You're like, I'm not sure how that this is going to work out. That's a burden, right? And what I want you to not miss about that, again, I can't cover all the burdens because they're all personal. What I don't want you to do now, and I believe Jesus will affirm this again when we get to his word, is get into the place of doing burden comparison with people in this room to say, I shouldn't be upset or weighed down by the thing that's bothering me this morning because I know there are people in this room that are dealing with so much more. Shouldn't be that, but it shouldn't also be the other place where you say, no one in this room could possibly understand the weight of what I am walking through. Therefore, Jesus has no answers for me. I feel confident without knowing the details of your burdens, and I'm not saying that to minimize them, to say that the rest that Jesus offers you for your burdens is sufficient, just like it is for the ones that I walked in this door with this morning. Amen? There are two states of the soul, the weary and the burdened. And chapter 11, verse 29 and following makes it clear, 3 simple words, what the answer to that is. I'm just going to state them again now, and then we're going to unpack it. And what the first one was, it was come. Come. Come to me. What's significant about that? I'm coming just today. I'm coming with the burdens. I'm coming with the weariness. I didn't have time to figure it out first and then come to Jesus. He just says, come. That's what he does all the time. Every time Jesus calls and invites, he just says, all you have to do is come. Leave where you are and come to where I am for this moment and let me speak life and truth into your situation. So come, right? Then what's the next word? Take. Take my yoke. And we'll get into further what a yoke is, if you don't know what that term is. But take my yoke, right? There's an action. When I come to him, I'm taking something onto myself, a new reality. And then what is the result? Find. Come, take, find. You will find rest for your souls. Whatever that state is this morning. And it may be a combination of weary and burden together. There may be so many layers to it. that you've given up a long time ago, really trying to understand how Jesus is going to make a difference in this situation. You've just accepted it as your reality. That burden has become your identity this morning. But you're so tired. You're so tired of carrying it, aren't you? Jesus has an answer for you today, too. Just want to give you today, in the time that we have left, I'll give you 3 realities of the rest that Jesus offers to weary and burdened souls. 3 realities of the rest that Jesus offers to weary and burdened souls. This is the first one. When I come to Jesus, he offers relationship where there was only rejection. When I come to Jesus, he offers relationship where there was only rejection. This speaks to Jesus' posture when he's talking to you this morning. This is his posture to you. Go back to verse 25. Jesus starts that section off by praising the Father. He's like, I'm praising you, Father, Lord of heaven, because you've hidden things from the wise and intelligent and revealed them to infants. In other words, Father, you've made it simple. You've made the solution simple for people. They don't have to study to understand how you love them, and that I am the answer and the manifestation of your love to them, that they don't have to do anything other than to come. I'm thankful that you've made it easy, he says. All things, verse 27, have been entrusted to me, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son desires to reveal to him. Speaking first to that rest that he offers in relationship. He's offering relationship to those that come to him. We need to address this one first, to the Father. Right? There's no way for me to have relationship to God the Father without the Son being the mediator in the middle of that, right? That's what he's saying there. I'm thankful, Father, that without me, without there being a solution, these people would never have the opportunity to know who you are. They would never know what your best would be for them. They could certainly never experience what it means to have a lifetime resting in your promises, except for me. And I'm there. His desire to give you rest, first and foremost, is for you to experience the love and the forgiveness of the Father. Colossians chapter 2, one of my most favorite passages, speaks to what I would call the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. Chapter 2, verse 13 and 14 says, and when you were dead in trespasses, in the uncircumcision of your flesh, he made you alive with him, and he forgave us all our trespasses. Love this verse. He erased the certificate of debt with its obligations that was against us and opposed to us, and he has taken it away by nailing it to the cross. What an amazing story, right? What an amazing promise. What an amazing reality. Now, Jesus says, what I did as that mediator between you and God, I took all of the faults, all of the things that you have done, the things that maybe you have felt shame over in the past, the things that put you under judgment rightfully because they were against the will of God. And I've taken those because of my life living perfectly before the Father, and I have nailed those to the cross. They are paid for. They are covered, and no more do you stand before me afraid in my presence. But God the Father sees you as a son or a daughter of his. He changed the nature of the relationship, right? That's for those who put their faith and trust in Jesus, who come to him and say, yes, I receive what you did on my behalf, Jesus, dying on the cross in my place for my sin, so that I might know the Father. That's how he initiated that relationship to receive rest. But it goes even further than that. Look, continues on there in verse number 29. He says, take up my yoke and learn from me. Why? Because I am lowly and humble in heart. I'm lowly and humble in heart. Different translation, maybe it's your reading, will say gentle and lowly. And Jesus is speaking there is towards the way that he receives us. He has every right as God in the flesh, without sin, to stand before us. He has every right to cast judgment, right? Because he's not done anything wrong. He has every right to do that. He would be justified in doing that. He'd be justified in demanding that I grovel to him, right? Please, Jesus, please give me a chance. But instead of painting himself in that light, he paints himself as this gentle and lowly person. What does he mean? Lowly of stature. Think about the way that Jesus came to this earth in the lowest form, right? In a stable, in a manger, in an unknown city that nobody cares about. That's where God the Son came into this world. That was by design. Jesus wanted to be accessible to everyone, to the great and to the small, to those that seemingly have their act together, which they don't, and to the rest of us that are honest. He's like, when you come to me, I'm not going to pull that list of offenses out of my pocket and point at them and show you, why did you do this? Why are you struggling with this? Why don't you believe my promises about this? I've told you 500 times. He says, no, I took that list and I nailed it to the cross. And no more is it going to come up between us. And I am here for you. That's what Jesus is saying to you today. I'm here to give rest to you. And I'll receive you in the state that you are, broken and burdened and unsure, scared. Come, he says. 1 Peter 5 says, cast all of your cares on Jesus. Why? Because he cares for you. I think we think about that, Jesus' care for us, as kind of like how we would manage care if we had like billions of children. Sort of like, yeah, I care about all of y'all, right? There's no way I can actually do anything with you, but I do care, like I promise. Like it's sort of a best case scenario, like thumbs up, I love y'all. I'm like a politician, it's like, hey, love you guys, vote for me. That's not the tone. When Jesus said that he's gentle and lowly and approachable, that means he's available one-on-one to you. Like you're the only child he has in the moment. To listen to the things that are on your heart, to hear you unpack those burdens. Not questioning you if you should be upset about it. Not shaming you because it's something that you've carried before. But he's just sitting with you like a friend sits with you in the living room, passing you the Kleenex, listening, speaking truth into the conversation where it needs to be said, putting his arm around you, weeping with you when you're weeping. We see that in Scripture too. Jesus is moved by the things we are moved by. Jesus' invitation to come to him with your burden and your weariness today isn't some kind of backhanded jab at your weakness. It's an offer of friendship. John 15:15 says, I no longer call you servants, because a servant doesn't know what his master is doing. I've called you friends. Jesus is that friend. He offers rest in the relationship, a relationship that's always available, a relationship that's always ready to listen, a relationship that will always empathize, always speak truth to you without a doubt, always give sacrificially to meet you in that place, and always defend you. That's why he's inviting you to come. He's like, come and see how I receive you. Try me. I won't disappoint. He offers relationship. Let's continue. What's the next thing he offers when he's offering rest? When I come to Jesus, he offers strength. Strength where there was only struggle. Where there was only struggle before. Again, remember, striving is what? It's laboring in my own strength after my own goals. It's a struggle, right? Some days it seems like I'm making ground, right? And then other days it blows up in my face. That's literally the definition of it. I'm trying to make something happen on my own. It's a struggle. I'm struggling all the time. Jesus is offering me not just companionship, but strength. Strength in the face of that, all right? This is speaking to his power, all right? First aspect spoke to his posture. This is his power at work. What does he invite us to do? Remember I told you what that second word was, take. Verse 29, take up my yoke and learn from me, because I'm lowly and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. And verse 30, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. All right, so what are we talking about when referring to a yoke? I think I got a picture of a yoke that we can put up on the screen here. But if you have done any kind of work with animals in the old days, probably haven't. I would guess most of us in the room have not done this, okay? There was a time where they didn't have tractors, okay? So you had to use your oxen to get out there and do farm things, like pull heavy stuff around and plow the ground, specifically used for plowing. And what you would do is you'd have two large oxen, and you would put this device that kind of is over their neck. All right, you see that? That is the yoke. And the purpose of the yoke is to put the combined strength of the oxen together and move it in the same direction. Right? Sort of like regulates how they work. So you don't have like the super aggressive one that's sort of dragging the other one along. Like they're moving along at the same pace. And believe it or not, I read up on this a lot more about yokes now than I knew before. But believe it or not, if you had two oxen on their own and they were just attached to a load without the yoke, they would not get the work done the same way. Like they would tend to go in different directions. Like very important. Or you'd have an outpacing thing. They can actually pull more weight and accomplish more work when they are yoked together. So Jesus used something, a picture here of something that was every day for the realities of those that were hearing him speak, of a common yoke. And what he's describing is when you come to him receiving rest, he says he compares it to taking up the yoke with him. In other words, taking up my position in the yoke alongside of Jesus, right, to accomplish the things that are before me. Now, I don't know about you, but maybe on first read, I was a little disappointed with Jesus' solution for rest here, because I'd much rather Jesus had said, like, come to me, all you weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And then he says, take up my pillow. You know, like that'd be so much nicer. Like Jesus would be like, you know what, I'll give you rest. Here, take my pillow and receive your rest. But instead, he gives us an implement of work, right? An implement of labor. I'm like, Jesus, I'm weary and burdened, right? The last thing I want to think about is having to labor harder, right? Putting on a yoke or pulling. This is not like light labor, pulling a plow. I mean, I can imagine. I haven't had to do it, but I can imagine that that's an easy thing to do. So why in the world is Jesus using this idea of a yoke, right? And he goes further. He clarifies in verse 30. He says, but for my yoke, though, is easy. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. You know what I believe Jesus is saying in this passage, and the reason that he invites me to take up the yoke with him? There's a couple realities. One we mentioned earlier. The struggle and the hardship and the burdens of this life do not magically stop when I come face to face with Jesus. Can we agree to that? It's true. In fact, I would even say there are on some occasions when walking with Jesus that actually there are harder burdens that come as a result of that. Sometimes those are relational burdens. Certainly there's spiritual attack that comes from that reality when I align my life, when I walk side by side with Jesus. There are effects of that happen in my life that are heavy burdens. And even just the reality of life in this world, it's not going to stop people from dying. It's not going to stop friends and relationships that I have from breaking down because of mistrust or other things that come between us. It's not going to stop financial hardships or changes in my job necessarily just because I'm walking with Jesus. So I think that's actually really important to point out because unfortunately, I believe sometimes you and I are guilty, perhaps encouraging others to come to Jesus for rest, and we paint an unrealistic picture of what that looks like. Like if you come to Jesus, all of a sudden, everything is just great. And to clarify, everything is much different, right? But it doesn't always feel great. And I think that's important to point out. Something that you hear at our church that we say often. If you're visiting here today, this is something that was on our website you may have seen when you were checking things out this morning, is that we want people at Salem Chapel to know and to experience how Jesus makes a difference in their everyday life. The reason that we say that is because we believe a relationship with Jesus is not just like this magic thing where all of a sudden everything in life aligns and makes perfect sense and I never have hardship ever again. But actually what Jesus is offering when he says, take up my yoke, and he's saying, I know that you're going to be walking through the fields of life and it's going to be hard. And every single day may be a struggle to believe what I am saying is true, but I am right there beside of you. I am yoked to you. I'm going to carry you through that. He's like, when you take on my yoke, what was difficult before, what felt impossible before, what was leaving you spread out on the floor, weary and burdened and crushed before, doesn't have to be anymore because what I say is true, and I'm going to give you what you need to push through that. I'm going to be there beside of you when you're doubting. I'm going to be reminding you of what is true. I'm going to bring people around you to support you when you need the help that you need. I'm going to give you the confidence that you need to trust me through very difficult things. Because I've already given you the answer. I've already given you the truth about who I am. And understanding that, walking through life, certainly, like I said, there are burdens that I see. And things that I experience and you experience that are very hurtful and personal. And they're very weighty. But with understanding of who I am in Jesus Christ, and the promise that he is with me in whatever it is I'm walking through, that he's going to provide for me in whatever situation that I'm in, I am ready. I am ready to walk and to take that next step. And it's one day at a time sometimes, right? That is how Jesus makes a difference. I'm able to move. I'm not paralyzed in place by my burden. I can take a step forward in confidence because I'm yoked to Jesus. He's got all the strength that I need. When he says move, I feel confident to move. When he says slow down, I'll slow down with him, right? What am I doing when I'm saying I'm yoked to Jesus? I'm surrendering to his direction and his outcomes. I'm letting him be Lord. I'm setting my self-sufficiency to the side, and I'm saying, do what you will. Your will be done in me as it is in heaven. See, the byproduct of being yoked to Jesus, you know what that is? It's peace. It's peace. And you know what the fruit of the labor that I get to share in as Jesus is right beside of me, right? Going through life, plowing those proverbial fields. You know what the fruit of that is? When I'm walking with Jesus, hand in hand, as he leads the way, it's discipleship. This is how Jesus makes me more like him. This is how Jesus does amazing things through me, not because I am strong, but because he is. This is how Jesus shows me and prepares me to have the faith and the confidence to face any burdens known and unknown that will happen in my life because he is leading the way. And I am yoked to him. The more I walk with Jesus, the lighter the load becomes because the strength of Christ is becoming my own. That's how you can rest while moving forward. It's peace. It's confidence, knowing that he has it. Finally, this morning, when I come to Jesus, he offers freedom where there was only fear. He offers freedom where there was only fear. I promise that wasn't a throwback to the 4th of July there, incorporating freedom into the point, although it works for you. Very thankful for freedom that we have. But this is freedom in Christ Jesus. What are we talking about here? This is about his protection, right? He shows us his posture. He gives us his power. That's part of his rest. But he also promises to protect, right? To keep us from fear, to give us freedom within the bounds of his love and protection. You have a great example of this in chapter 12 there in the first few verses. An interaction happens with the disciples right after this, right? So listen. He says, at this time, Jesus passed through the grain fields on the Sabbath day. That's significant, right? Keep that in mind. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pick and eat some heads of grain. When the Pharisees saw this, these were the religious leaders of the day, very zealous. They said to Jesus, see, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath day, right? If you don't know much about the Pharisees or the law, basically, God's example of rest that was given to them in the Old Testament, they had turned that into a series of religious activities that we have to do to rest. Isn't that crazy? It's like packing up that car to go to the beach, right? Before we can rest, we've got to pack up the car with all the trash, like make sure we've got all the baggage. And this is what the Pharisees are doing. They're like, hey, I know you guys are resting on the Sabbath, but you're resting wrong, okay? So I'm going to make sure that we correct you. They go up to Jesus. They give Jesus some stern words there. See, your disciples are not doing what is lawful. And Jesus said to them, verse 3, haven't you read what David did when he and those who were with him were hungry, how he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence? He's referencing something that David did with some soldiers in the Old Testament. They came into the holy place and ate the bread that was supposed to be for the priests. Or verse 5, haven't you read in the law? On the Sabbath day, the priests in the temple even violate the Sabbath, and they're innocent. I tell you, something greater than the temple. Another way to say that, I tell you, something greater than religious activity is here. If you had known what this phrase means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent, my disciples. And he says, verse 8, for the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. I don't have time to unpack all the nuance of that amazing passage right there, but just picture that in your mind. Jesus, God himself, walking with his disciples, right? The same God, I should clarify, who declared the need for Sabbath and rest, right? It was his idea, walking with his disciples through a grain field. Now, lest you think they were like stealing some grain, that wasn't a thing back then, all right? You were allowed to eat people's grain when you walked through the field. It's a real thing. It's like a community awareness, right? My grain is your grain. All right, so they weren't harvesting. They're just popping off a few seed heads and like sunflower seeds, popping them in, taking a snack break, walking with Jesus through the field. You know what the disciples were not thinking about at all in that moment? If they were following the rules of the Sabbath. Now, the Pharisees were quick to point it out. And unfortunately, many of us, and there have been many people in our life, perhaps, if you came from a church where you felt like this was your everyday Sunday reality, sometimes we get a little aggressive with the religious rules. You're not coming to Jesus the right way. Jesus wants you to do this before he'll talk to you. Jesus wants you to wear this, to act like this, to express this reality of spiritual maturity before he will agree to be with you. And what Jesus had to say to those Pharisees, and for maybe those people that have said things like that to you, and just to be clear, you need to pray for them that they will understand the grace of Jesus Christ. That's what they need. But in that moment of the threat of judgment from the Pharisees, you know what the disciples were not feeling? They were not feeling any of that. Why? Because they were with Jesus. There was freedom in Jesus. When I'm coming to Jesus, that means I'm seeking to live under his authority and under his provision. The point of the rest that he offers to me is not just for me to have a physical rest and a refreshing. It's for me to be with him. He knows that's what I need the most. Not more time on the beach, but more time with him. That's where he gives that freedom, a freedom from what other people think. Why? Because I'm more concerned about what Jesus thinks of me. It's freedom from the fear of failure because I am under the sovereign will and protection of Jesus Christ. Freedom from the fear of disappointing other people. Why? Because I'm already loved beyond my understanding, despite many failures. And freedom from the fear of judgment because Jesus' word is final. And his words where it is finished. And his word to you and to me this morning is really, really, really simple. So simple that the most youngest person could understand this in the room. It's come. Come to me this morning. You that are weary, you with great burdens. Come to me. I am gentle. I am lowly. I am accessible. I am available to you. Come and step into freedom where I am. Take up my yoke. It's light. It's generous. It gives. It doesn't take. Come, take, and find. Find rest this morning. Just a second. I'm going to give us a chance to respond to that. So I think it's good. Sort of be frustrating to have a sermon on rest and not get to take a moment to kind of rest a little bit in it, right? I think we'll take a moment, and hopefully you received some of these communion elements on the way in. In case you're like, I don't know what this is, never seen this before, this is something we do as Christians. Jesus told us regularly to remember what his body and blood accomplished on the cross for our sin. And so he did that with his own disciples by breaking bread and drinking wine, drinking juice to represent his body and blood. And we do that as well. Church has been doing this for thousands of years, right? To remember that the answer to the rest that I need today and every day is found in Jesus Christ. So if you didn't get one, got guys here that have some that can pass one to you. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to step to the side for a moment, and I just want to give you a moment there at your seat. Just do what you need to do. You need to pray. You just need to close your eyes. You need to surrender in your spirit. Jesus, I need to come to you today. I'm a wreck. I'm an absolute wreck. I'm weak. My burdens are heavy. Can you come? Can I take up that yoke with you today? Will you give me guidance as I walk through that? Will you help me find your rest? So again, I'm going to pray, and then I'll just give you a minute, and then I'll come back and I'll lead us in taking the elements together. Jesus, we thank you that you are the answer for everything that we need. And thank you for the rest that is given so generously and freely. A rest that is without condemnation. A rest that is without condition. Jesus, thank you that rest is something that you don't just promise now in this moment or now or for once in our life, but something that you give every day when we come. So give us the courage to come, to take up your yoke and to find that rest today. In Jesus' name, amen.